Hi guys, and welcome to another video on living in Canada. Today we're going to talk a bit about PR documentation and things that you can start preparing while waiting for your ITA. And by the way, this video idea was given by one of my dear viewers, and I think that this is an excellent question. So let's say that you've submitted your profile and that you're excited and you're waiting to get your ITA or your invitation to apply. But to be very realistic, you can never know for sure when that day will come, when that will happen. It could be a year from now, it could be 2 years from now, or it could even happen in 3 or 4 months. So the question is, should you just sit around and wait until you get that ITA and then start preparing all of your documents, or should you start now? And the answer, very obviously 100%, is yes, you should start preparing your documents now. Do not wait until you receive your ITA, because once you get your ITA sent to you, you will only get a very limited time to prepare your documents. So if you ask me, in general, there are two kinds of documents. The first group of documentation are things that you can do on your own. So documents that you already have, or information that you just need to summarize, forms you need to fill out, and that you can get done pretty quickly. And group number 2 are those types of documents where you need to rely on a third party to get those documents completed. And in this video today, I am going to talk about 3 of those documents. But before we continue, guys, a big disclaimer as usual, I am not an immigration consultant or immigration lawyer. So all I'm doing in this video here is to share with you my personal experience in the hopes that it can help you as well. If you need advice for your particular case, seek advice from an immigration lawyer. That being said, let's continue with those 3 documents that I think you should prepare far in advance, even before getting your ITA. The first document is a foreign police certificate. And here the reason why I'm stressing foreign is because sometimes you are also required to submit a Canadian police clearance certificate. So as for the Canadian one, that is pretty easy and that went pretty fast. I got mine in a matter of, I would say, a month. But as for the foreign police certificate, it really depends on the foreign police organization. So list down all the police certificates, all the foreign police certificates that you need. And if you've lived for some time in several countries, then chances are that you will need a few. I've lived and worked in Indonesia and also in Singapore. So in my case, I needed to submit both. So how long does it take to get a police clearance certificate? It really depends on the country, as I said. Some countries process that very fast, and you can get it in a matter of a month or 6 weeks. And you will know much better than I how fast those kinds of things work in your country. In some countries, it can take you months and months, and you can even face a lot of difficulties in obtaining that police clearance certificate. Okay guys, in this video, I am not going into the details of the requirements of the certificate itself and how it works. I am just telling you that you need to start working on it as soon as possible. Start and research the requirements in much detail, and that includes figuring out exactly from the canada.ca website what kind of document you need exactly, and then figuring out exactly what steps you need to take and how long it takes, how much it costs, etc. to get that certificate. By the way, guys, very important, in this video I am not talking about all the documents that you need for your PR application submission, but I'm only talking about some of the things that I think usually require more time and that you should start preparing in advance. So now let's go on to the second thing. The second document that requires quite a lot of time and that you should start preparing far in advance is your ECA, or your Educational Credential Assessment. So when you set up your profile, you declare to immigrations that you had this and this education. That could be a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and so on. So if you did not earn that education, that degree in Canada, you will need to have an ECA to prove, to get an assessment that it is equivalent to a Canadian one. So for example, if you got your bachelor's degree, let's say in India, then you need that ECA to show the government that your education, your bachelor's degree in India is equivalent to a bachelor's degree here in Canada. And there are several ways, several places that you can get this ECA, and I will not go into too much detail in this video. So if you want to know the full scope on that, you can check out this video up here on ECA and how it works. But what I want to stress in this video here is the timeline. It takes quite a lot of time to get your ECA. By the way, guys, if you found this video useful so far, then please let me know by hitting the like button. I would really appreciate that. So the organization that I used to get my ECA was WES, and I would say that in total they perhaps took about 1 to 2 months to process my ECA, but that's only one part of the equation. So the organization that issues that ECA, they will assess your degree, your grades, and I would say they're pretty fast with it. But in order for them to start, they need to get hold of your degrees, your transcripts. The problem is that you yourself, you cannot be the one sending in those documents. Rather, the institution, your school in your home country, they need to be the one who send those documents straight to that organization. And that is where it can sometimes take a lot of time. So in my case, for example, I graduated from a university in Germany. It took me a while to figure out who was in charge, to get in touch with someone who was able to help me, and then to explain the whole situation to them, what I needed, and to finally get them to print out my diploma, my transcripts, and then send it over in physical form in an envelope to that organization. So in my case, that part took me about 2 months, but it can be vastly different depending on the school that you're dealing with. If your school's administration is very efficient, very helpful, then that can happen in a matter of a month. But the problem is, if it's not very efficient, if they're not very helpful, and if it takes you a long time to figure out who can help you and who's in charge, then the whole process can easily get extended to a couple of months. And after you send it to the organization that processes the ECA, it can take another 1 or 2 months. So I would say if you wait until you get your ITA and then start to process your ECA or your educational credential assessment, it is definitely too late. That is something that you need to start far in advance. And the great thing is that unlike the police certificate, the ECA does not have an expiry date. They assess your degree, your transcripts, and once they've assessed it, the ECA will be valid forever. And that is why the ECA is one of the things that you should get started right away once you submit your profile. Now let's go on to the next set of documents that you should prepare far in advance before even receiving your ITA, and that is your job references. So when you submitted your profile, you declared to immigrations that you had this and this job experience, right? Now after you receive your ITA, your invitation to apply, it will be your turn to actually prove it, to prove that you actually have this and this job at this company for this long, that you had this title, that you earned this much money, and so on. So at the time when I submitted my application, they still use the system of NOC, and I believe that soon in November they're going to change that, so things will be slightly different. But it won't change the fact that if you want to prove any of your job experience, if that is still required that you prove your job experience, you will need to do that by getting those references. Just in case, if you're watching this in some future where that is no longer needed, where job experience is no longer a requirement, then just ignore the whole thing. But if as you're watching this, you are still required to prove your job experience, then you will likely need to submit references from your employer. And again, that will depend on how many jobs you had, how many jobs you want to prove that you had, and also, most of all, how long it will take your employer. Because here's the thing, if you're currently working for a company and you're on good terms with them, then it's pretty easy to get a reference letter in a matter of 1 or 2 weeks, or sometimes even a day or 2. And by the way, guys, sorry, here I'm using the terms reference letter and employment letter interchangeably. Actually, what you do need is an employment letter. And there are also various requirements, things that have to go into the employment letter, which I do not want to get into in this video. So anyway, if you had a job that was 2 years ago and you lost contact with the employer, you never talked to them, and perhaps the HR person has already changed, your line manager is no longer there, in that case, it might take you much longer to get that reference letter. It might take you 1 or 2 months. And because of that, you also definitely do not want to wait until you get your ITA and then start getting all these letters together, because these letters, they're not something that you yourself can just take care of. You are relying on a third party, on other people to get that done for you. And if they take a long time, if they take too long, then that might delay your whole process and you might miss the deadline. So guys, just to share with you, I also started working on all these documents before I got my ITA. So in my case, I got my ITA approximately 1 year after I submitted my profile. So after I submitted my profile, I gradually started collecting information and researching in detail what was needed. I made a lot of notes, I sent out a lot of emails, I started getting in touch with the various parties to make sure that I knew exactly what I needed, what I could prepare on my end to speed up the whole process. So I got my ECA far in advance, even before I got my ITA. But with the police certificate, I started off just researching the information, getting in touch, emailing the police from which I needed the police clearance certificate. But I only started sending out an application and processing it once I got my ETA. And as for the employment letters, my husband started collecting them as soon as we submitted our profile. And because there were several employers, that whole thing got done within a span of perhaps 3 to 4 months. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this video, if you have any questions, and I'll try my best to get back. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.